Need to get to an agenda.
It's probably thinks it's all.
For those who are joining on Zoom, can you hear us loud and clear?
Yes.
Testing, can you hear me? This is Kurt.
Sorry. It's on the.
It's on the invite. Oh, I can't get to it from this. Okay. All right.
I am here. I didn't know if my name was called or not. I had some issues connecting.
Great. Who is online?
So we have John, we have Justin.
Justin
Where is with Time Bond
and Lars.
and Lars.
Okay. You ready? You think? Yes, or maybe, other than the fact that I got nothing. Calling to order the Needham February 12th Quiet Zone meeting. And I would call a roll, except I don't have a list of names, if anybody does. I think in the room,
In the room, it's Duncan, you, me.
we are the three members in the
Yes.
room. All right, and online, I think we have three members online. Lars. If you can just say yes, that you can hear us.
Yep, I can hear you.
John
Yes.
Conlon. Okay, and Justin McCullen.
Present.
All right. The minutes were attached to the agenda, were they? Okay. Then there is a request to approve the minutes. I don't know if there are any changes. If there are none, then we'll put them on file. We're ready for project update. Are you, who's in charge on this
We're
one?
gonna let him be in charge, just in case it comes, so
Okay.
we can.
And if you can remind us of names, that would be great.
Dan Murphy, project manager.
Perfect, thank you.
Rich Benevento, Senior Vice President, Time Bond.
I'm Abby Mills from Time Bond.
And online, we have Kurt Anderson from Benish.
Okay,
So we've got a presentation to kind of lay it out, but we're glad to be here with the working group. And we're looking at it very much as a working meeting. We've brought some recommendations. And these will form the basis of the diagnostic meetings with MBTA, Keolis, Federal Rail Administration, and other stakeholders. Certainly at any point, if you have a question, feel free to interrupt. Again, you know, we're looking for, just an informal working group.
can I
Conversation,
just
yeah.
start by
Yes.
saying that I am a little frustrated that we didn't receive any materials in advance?
Okay,
Okay, so in the future, the next time we meet, it would be very helpful. To at least
Sure.
receive what you're planning, so we have some sense of what's coming.
sure. No, I apologize for that.
That will let all of us be more prepared for the conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, if we go to the first slide, just a real quick, agenda, we're gonna talk about, very briefly, the review of the previous reports and studies. We're gonna talk about the recommendations that we pulled out of those, and, we'll be advancing towards the diagnostic meetings. Then we'll talk about a tentative schedule we've set up for the diagnostic meetings, and then obviously discussion. And again, certainly if at any point during the presentation you have a question, feel free to interrupt. So we did look at the prior documents that were done, the 2013 report, the 2015 study, and the 2024 feasibility by GPI, and the various meetings and correspondences with MBTA. There were recommendations made that in general we agree with and will be advancing 4 quad gates at 3 of the locations and channelization at 2 of the locations. And if you go to the map on the next slide, the recommendations were to install 4 quad gate systems at West Street, May Street, and Oak Street, and then channelization at Rosemary Street and Great Plain Avenue. We posted the Needham Center Station is up there, and we'll talk about that a little bit briefly, but the diagnostic team will have to take a look at those, see if there's any recommendations at those locations. Next slide. So in advancing the recommendations, and we're gonna talk specifically through each location following these slides, but I wanted to kind of present these two slides as kind of advanced information to inform those discussions. And it has to deal with the pedestrian facilities at the vehicle crossings. The MUTCD, the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, latest edition, that came out last year. Well, 2 years ago now, requires where there are swing gates, it requires there to be an exit emergency escape route that's gated in addition to the pedestrian gate. And Kurt will talk more about that as well. And just to show how that might be applied, the next slide is a diagrammatic application. And on the left, you will see an application where the walking path is slightly removed from the road. On the right, you'll see an application where the walking path or the sidewalk is adjacent to the roadway, which is typical for most of the locations here in Needham. And what you see is the sidewalk follows, let me see if my little laser shows up on that screen. Little, no, okay.
You wanna like hover over something?
Sure. So in this diagram, you'll see that, you know, the sidewalk follows the edge of the road. And there's a pedestrian gate closing the pedestrian route on either side. And same thing on the other side of the road, you've got pedestrian gates. Or, you know, here it's a gate, here it's specifically a pedestrian gate. But in order to not trap anybody within the train envelope, there needs to be an escape route so that they don't get stuck between the gate and the train as it passes. So this allows them an avenue to get out. And then there's a push gate that allows them to push out and then return to the sidewalk on the other side of the gate. And then the same thing over here. If they're stuck inside the gate when it comes down, they can go around through this push gate. So that's
That was
something,
reflected in your earlier slide. Your earlier slide shows that
right?
a little bit
Yep.
more graphically.
Yep, and if you want to go back to the other slide, this is where that gate shows up. And on the outside, as you're approaching the rails, the sign says do not enter. It's not typically open. But on the inside, if you again were stuck inside the gate, there's a little sign that says push to exit. So people can get out and out of harm's way. So back to that next slide. This is part of what we will be considering in design. Again, we'll be making recommendations here and want to hear what you guys have to say about them. And the end result of this conversation tonight will be that we'll have a solid set of recommendations that will advance to the diagnostic meetings.
Is that a
Yeah, is this required or is it recommended?
What's that? The emergency route, the escape routes?
no,
Yeah.
the gate with the escape route, yeah.
The gate is, it's a shall. And if there is a swing gate, I think the wording in the MTCD says there shall be a gate. Kurt, is that correct?
I mean, yeah, I'm not questioning the gate, the notion of an escape route. I mean, this is, pardon me, the dumbest thing I've ever seen. You're gonna create enough room to have an escape route, then can't people just stay to the side? Like, this is like, it doesn't accomplish anything.
Not according to federal highway. Federal highway does not want anyone to get stuck between the gates on either side of the tracks. So
Yeah,
what they said is if the train's coming and that gate went down and someone went on the inside part of the gate towards the tracks and that gate came down, they can't stand there. They need to exit. So that's what federal highway or federal railroads actually says. You have to have an escape route for them. That's not something we came up with. This is a standard.
no, I understand. I definitely understand you didn't come up with it. I'm just trying to understand whether it's a requirement or a recommendation, because essentially to accomplish the ability to provide what I presume is a ADA compliant escape route, the gates for the pedestrian walkways have to be set back far enough away from the train tracks that there's enough room to maneuver to get to the escape route, which I would think would be enough space for someone to be out of the right of way of the train tracks
Agreed.
to begin with. So it's just like unbelievably over-engineered for a very limited likely out.
Is
Correct.
Kurt want to comment?
Yeah, is Kurt still on? Kurt? I'm sorry.
It's here.
Kurt's on. He's not muted. We can't hear.
Kurt, are you there?
So I guess my question is, currently the gates that we have are currently located on the road side of the. Sidewalk, not the back side of the sidewalk. Are they required to go on the back side of the sidewalk?
No, no, and actually, the example I showed where the gate goes out over the sidewalk and the road, that can only be done on the exiting side. On the entering side of the railroad envelope, there have to be two separate gates. There'd be a road gate and there'd be a pedestrian gate.
But are you required to place them on the back side of the road? Like, I guess with
This
the,
gate, this
yeah,
extra gate, yeah.
Oh,
like, are you required to pull the gate so that it blocks the sidewalk as well?
I think we're hearing shall, nobody's told us required, I think that's why we want Kurt.
there's flexibility in where it goes. It goes to the back of the sidewalk or it goes to the front of the sidewalk. If your main sidewalk is toward the back,
Mhm.
the escape route can be towards the front.
But I guess
I
my
have
question is.
section 8 open right now, so I'm just trying to confirm it.
Yeah, does the gate have to block the sidewalk?
The swing gate, the pedestrian gate, the regular gate, not the emergency gate.
The regular gate, does the regular gate have to block the sidewalk?
Your regular gates now do block the sidewalk. It's not a requirement
So I
to have the
think
pedestrian
the
gates.
way they block the sidewalk is by like a,
Right now, you've got scissor gates.
yes, okay,
It's
Yeah.
two pieces in one.
Correct.
Those aren't technically allowed anymore.
Okay.
Because a trapped pedestrian can lift that gate. And when it does, the road gate also lifts.
okay.
So we'll talk a little bit more about that application, particularly at Great Plain Ave.
Is Kurt back on?
Hey,
Hi,
Kurt.
can you hear me?
There
Yep,
we go.
Yep,
Okay.
we lost you a little bit. We're talking about the escape route. And whether or not the escape route gate is a requirement. If I remember correctly, the METCD calls it a shall. But if we have swing gates on the pedestrian route. It's a requirement.
Can you go back to the previous slide? So you're talking about the gate that says do not enter?
Yes,
Okay, so that is an optional sign in the METCD, or optional gate in the METCD. It's not required. What you're trying to do is limit the possibility for somebody to go the escape route and then, bypass the gate for the sidewalk. So it's good practice to do that, but it's an option only in the manual. What is required, what is a should requirement, is installing the escape route. And, and since it's a should requirement, it should be done unless there's some safety or emergency or engineering reason why it can't be done. So it's not a shall condition, it's a should condition, and you have to have a very good reason not to do the escape route. But the
I imagine,
gate is optional.
the escape route was required to be ADA accessible as well.
Yes.
Do we have enough real estate for this? This is what I'm trying to
I'm
figure
not
out.
even sure, yeah.
Not at the town center.
You
I'm
don't.
not sure what we have.
No, we don't have anything, so.
So is,
Yeah,
so,
what
so Kurt
you
is
got
right.
out there now is not ADA acceptable for sure. There's poles in the middle of the sidewalks and, all kinds of issues from an accessibility standpoint.
So it comes down to right of way issues, right? You have the right of way to fit the stuff
Yeah,
in.
we've got some examples later on. We can kind of show you what West Street might look like with 4-quadrant gates and this exit path system, so.
I mean, this would
Okay.
be on the MBTA, largely on the MBTA's property in order to accommodate this, correct?
Right, that's what you'll see at West Street. That's what we try to just keep
With
it
it right away.
primarily on the railroad right away.
Well, they have 15 feet from the tracks, so.
All right, so I think we have more questions on this, but why don't we keep going and we'll
Yeah.
see what else we have on top of this.
We'll walk through the locations and Kurt's gonna walk us through, starting at West Street.
But for the guys who are online, what you should know is everybody in the room is as confused as you are by this requirement, so we'll keep going.
Yeah, so this is the West Street location. This is one of them. We're looking at 4 quadrant gates. And you can see the scissor gate over there to the right. I'm sure you're all very familiar with that. It comes down when the entrance gate for the roadway vehicles comes down. And then, like it was explained earlier, a pedestrian can actually take that exit gate or the pedestrian gate and lift it up. And because of how it's geared, it can raise that entrance gate for the vehicles. So this type of arrangement has been, it's out of date and not really used anymore. This is very old equipment that's installed here. So typically the typical installation would be a separate pedestrian gate and not try to do the scissor gates together. But that's something we'll work with the railroad from their design standpoint on how that might work. So do we want to go to the next location? Oh, okay, good. So this is what we laid out for West Street as a possibility for 4 quadrant gates. And you can see you've got to have extra gates for the drivers. You've got an entrance gate and a exit gate on each side for the drivers, and those exit gates are controlled by loops that are installed between the gates and the railroad, so that if a vehicle gets in there and they get past the entrance gate, you don't want to have that exit gate close in front of them. So it'll keep the exit gate up. The vehicle detection will keep the exit gate up until the vehicle clears, and then the exit gate will lower. Completely.
Kurt, give me just a second to kind of lay out the equipment here. So when he talks about the entrance gate, if the vehicle's traveling west, they're first gonna hit the entrance gate because they're entering the train envelope, and then there's the exit gate. So right now you've got gates, a 2 quad system that cover the entering approach to the envelope. And then he's describing the exit gates that would be added to create a 4 quad system. And as he said, the entering gates would close first, the exiting gates would close second.
So each gate has a lane essentially.
Yes.
Right, in this case.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, so then the other features you'll see on there is there's separate pedestrian gates that are just outside of the roadway gates. And the gate will come down towards the roadway gate. So that's how they're positioned. And then to the outside of that, you'll see that there's the little escape gate there. That's the escape path if someone gets stuck between the 2 gates.
Is that in the parking
The one on the north side is in the parking lot. It takes up, I think, probably a couple of parking spots there. But we tried to keep most of it on railroad right away if we could, but I don't think the one in the southeast quadrant, I don't think we're on railroad property there. I think that's other property, so. But again, this is just a concept. We haven't done any detailed design with survey or anything like that. We're just showing conceptually what we could do, and we're trying to do this to see if there's concurrence among the group that this is the right thing to do for our diagnostic coming up.
Would the permitting for this all happen at once as far as utilizing the right of way of the MBTA for the emergency pedestrian egress, as well as all the work that we'll be doing for the project itself? Or is that 2 separate processes?
I'm sorry, I did not catch that question.
Sorry, would the permitting for this project all happen as one process? Or would we have to do two separate processes, one for the gates and another for utilizing the property for the emergency bypass?
So typically the railroads, and I need to find this out for MBTA, and maybe Dan can help answer that question, but you know, the actual physical equipment and the cost associated with doing that is one thing. If there's additional property that needs to be utilized, we'll typically have to work through the railroad's real estate division to get easements, permanent easements, you know, whatever for the additional width.
Are there alternative designs available that are much more compact and stay much more in line with what's in place today in terms of, I understand the gearing of the pedestrian gate impacting the road gate is really bad, but is there some way to separate those without needing to claim multiple parking spaces worth of land on all four corners?
So when we looked at this, we looked at various different types of alternatives. If you can go back a couple of slides, maybe back to that one, right? So, you know, what we were looking at, and, you know, what we'll show in probably a little bit more of a crude diagram is that the locations that have, that aren't 4-quadrant gate, we can utilize the existing entrance gates for the pedestrian gates, and then, you know, build the other entrance gate, you know, across the sidewalk on the other side, just like shown in diagram B. So, but we can't do that on the 4-quadrant gate locations because we can't utilize the exit gate as a pedestrian gate, because they're designed to be fail-safe in the up position, not the down position, and they're controlled by the presence of a train, as well as the vehicle detection and presence of vehicles, you know, within the crossing area. So you can't reliably use an exit gate to control pedestrian traffic across the crossing. Does that make sense?
It does, but I guess if I understand, and I'm sorry, I'm not there or can't remember exactly, but if I recall, there already are, well, not, maybe they're not independent. It sounds like the gearing is connected, but there are pedestrian gates on the entrance and exit on all four corners of these intersections. It's only the vehicle gates that are on the entrance sides only. So what I'm wondering is, can we separate the gearing so that issue goes away, but otherwise stay consistent with what the existing infrastructure consumption is? Like this is like making this really big, and I'm just wondering, is that really necessary if we already have a lot of the infrastructure there in terms of layout?
So what I showed you was, you know, a change from a 2-quadrant gate system to a 4-quadrant gate system. And utilizing the 4-quadrant gate system, we're pretty well stuck with utilizing a diagram A scenario, because we can't use the exit gates to control pedestrian traffic across the sidewalks like you can with the entrance gates. So maybe it would help if we could go to like either the Great Plains or the Rosemary, maybe. I think Rosemary is probably the next one, right? So let's go to the overhead view on the Rosemary one. So what we're proposing here is that you've got the entrance gates there. They already have the scissor gates, like, you know, we had talked about before, and we've got to get, you know, approval from the railroad to continue to use those. But if we can continue to use those, what you're seeing is a much narrower footprint that basically is just providing the exit path around the back side of the gates. in case you get stuck between the two. And those red marks are just to represent the escape gate. So that's, which of course we discussed earlier was an option. But this shows about as narrow a profile that we can have, and really we can only utilize this in locations with channelization, where we're not using 4-quadrant gates and exit gates, if that makes sense.
So this could be done all on the current sidewalk or slightly into MBTA right of way?
Yeah, so you can see Dan, I don't know if you want to explain it better there, but you can see the grayed out area that's shown on that diagram. That's additional,
On the street.
I believe, right, Dan?
Yeah, it goes beyond the town's layout, yeah.
I know because of the oblique angle of the crossing you've got between the foul line and that escape gate on the wide angles, that's a long way. There's,
Yeah, I mean, the way I've shown it.
Yeah.
I show the expanded layout going all the way across the tracks, but technically it doesn't have to go that far. It can just, it won't have to go across the track itself. It'll be more like the corners that Kurt had drawn in the previous illustration.
Okay.
And I'll just throw in here now that the detailed concept you saw for West Street, that's the level of drawing that'll be prepared at each location for the diagnostic meeting.
And then I guess the other question for this specific crossing is, I assume you're showing 100 feet channelization.
Yes.
We can do down to 60 feet though, correct?
You can do 60 feet to a commercial driveway or a nearby intersection, roadway intersection. That's right. So if those driveways are within 60 feet, we can cut the channelization off at the driveways and allow left turns out of there and
So
into it.
when you talk about commercial, would that include the libraries, the upper right corner, parking for the pool is the bottom left corner? Those would qualify?
It's anything rather than residence. And I think the quiet zone rule would even allow residential if there's up to 4 residents, like if you've got a small apartment complex or something like that, then they consider that technically a commercial driveway for the rule purposes. But it's not for residential driveways.
So I guess I would just say if these are the diagrams that are being prepared for the diagnostic review, I would say we would want to show the 60 feet channelization unless others in the group disagree, and limit the amount of one-way turns we're forcing upon various property users and uses in this area.
I agree with that.
I agree with you. And like Dan said, all of our concept drawings will be, more like what you saw for West Street.
Okay.
So May Street, again, we only did the one concept plan for West, and that was just to give you an idea what it would look like. We would propose something similar at this location and, try to limit as much property taking as possible and keep it on MBTA right away as we can. So, but again, it's very tight. You see poles in the middle of the sidewalk. There may be issues when we get into 4-quadrant gates to try to avoid, wire lines, those kinds of issues. And those will be figured out when we get into the diagnostic team field meeting.
Real on this one, yeah. There you go.
So I guess I have a question on that. Do we not have an ADA compliant sidewalk there with the gate in the middle of the sidewalk? And if that's the case, when you touch it, do you have to make it compliant like we do in other?
Yes.
I mean, as soon as you touch it,
But I think it is compliant. I mean, it's 3.5 feet at least around that pole.
Okay,
I believe. I mean, I walk it all the time. pretty sure it complies. I mean, granted, it's not ideal to have a pole in the middle of the sidewalk, but,
3 feet of punch boards.
Like path of travel.
Thanks.
I guess to answer that question, our design, will need to be ADA compliant. So if we need to make some adjustments to make it ADA compliant, we'll need to do that.
Question. Is the MBTA required to give us the easements or can they deny them?
It would be their easements.
There,
Dan, I think I'm going to rely on you on some of your experience with MBTA and that in the past.
They did be motivated to cooperate. But
I mean, I think,
It would be a permit, I mean, a construction permit.
well, there's a couple of things when you're dealing with the MBTA, right? So I think if the equipment is already within their right of way, that's one thing. I think the bigger question is if you need easements from private property owners, those get conveyed to the MBTA, they wouldn't be conveyed to the town. Right, and then I guess the other question with that, and this is maybe for Kurt in some of his past experiences, the whole issue of should versus shall. If you go into the MUTCD, they're very specific. It's should, shall, may. Those are the three terms in the manual. Should, shall means you just have to do it. You don't have any, you don't have any latitude with that. Should is, as Kurt explained, you should try and do it. It's a good practice. It's safety. It's all these other things. The question then becomes, is not having the right of way or having to go get the required right of way, is that a compelling reason that you don't have to do it? And that's gonna rest with the railroad. They're gonna say, we don't believe that the fact that you need right of way is a compelling reason to say you don't have to do this. That's technically it'd be their call.
That right away is all private. If you're off the T, right?
Yeah.
So there's a couple other factors that'll be involved. It wouldn't necessarily be just the railroad. At the diagnostic meeting, we're gonna have DPU there. We'll also have the FRA there, and they're gonna weigh in on safety recommendations. And I know the FRA for sure is concerned about pedestrian safety and, making sure that the sidewalks are accessible and safe for all. So, it's not going to be a solely railroad decision, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make.
yeah,
You guys
I
meet
guess,
the diagnostic meeting.
I guess I would just say, I think everybody that's on this call agrees. I mean, we're definitely not in any way want to do short shrift to safety, but at the same time, trying to think about how to do this in the most compact, efficient, least need to get stuff from other people way possible. Instead of trying to get, the ultimate ideal manual compliant design in every circumstance.
I want to go back to your question too. It may be that these easements being granted to the railroad, but it may be the town has to pay the land damage costs. And again, those are all things that remain to be.
I don't think that's a may.
That's a shall.
I
think it's a must, but yeah, we know where that's going.
I mean, for I think 2 years, we've been trying to get permit to park cars on the parking lot that we're now putting.
Yeah.
Infrastructure on.
Yeah, so that is one of the challenges of the corridor is how narrow, the right of way is for the roadways across the railroad. We understand that, and we know we need to do everything we can to, get our design as compact as possible. And like we were trying to do with West Street, try to get as much of it on MBTA property as we possibly could. Right. So Great Plain, we need to visit a little bit about that one. Our initial thought is that we could do Great Plain with channelization. And when you're ready to do the streetscape project, we can still keep it as a channelized crossing within the quiet zone. In other words, don't ever really look at 4-quadrant gates. There would be a lot of issues associated with looking at 4-quadrant gates with the streetscape design and the bike lanes, and we'd be looking at a scenario of having 8 gates out there probably. It's about the only way we could figure out how to do it. So that would be a very expensive alternative, and it's not really needed when you can do the channelization at this location and qualify for the quiet zone. We ran the calculations just to verify, the work that was previously done. And, the advantage that you've got at Great Plain, so if you go to the next slide, there's an overhead. There's that driveway that's in the southwest quadrant. And because that driveway the right turn out of there would turn into the gate and have the channelization or the median right in front of them, the FRA has pretty well given full credit for that, almost as if it was an SSM, even though you'd be submitting it as an ASM. You get almost full risk reduction credit for that. So with that risk reduction credit, you're well below the requirements for the NSRT or the Quiet Zone Risk Index. So channelization works for this application. And I don't see that you'd want to consider 4-quadrant gates, but I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
So that's the old,
We talked to the consultant doing the downtown, and that has been our guidance, is that we are looking at upgrading the aesthetic of the channelization, but that channelization would be the treatment that we're looking for there.
Yeah.
can you explain what you meant about the right turn out of there again? I just was trying to figure out.
Yeah, so ideally, it would be great if you could just make that just a entrance driveway and have them come out the other side. I don't know if that's feasible or not, or if people need to be able to exit that driveway. But if they did exit that driveway, and the only thing they can do would be turn right because there's a median in front of them. And when they turn right, the entrance gate for the train would be down. So there really isn't any, the purpose for all of these supplemental safety measures is try to avoid people from driving around the gates. And there really isn't a way that somebody coming out of that driveway can effectively drive around the gate with a median in front of them.
I understand. None of us have any idea there was a back entrance.
You wanna go back to the photo before that, see if you can see
Yeah.
it?
There's a back, there's
We
a
should
chain, there's a chain that goes across it, and they would need to get access rights from the Denmark Lane condo.
Okay,
It's something we would like to investigate because I think it's a safer alternative and present it to the diagnostic team, but we can make it work without that. But, it would be better.
now.
Kurt, why do you say that it would be an ASM? Isn't channelization as supplemental safety measure? Like why is it thought of as an ASM?
Yeah, so it's a supplemental safety measure as long as you don't have any driveways or commercial driveways or roadway intersections within 60 feet.
Interesting.
And in this case, you've got it, 10 feet, 5 feet, whatever it is.
Can you go to that slide again, the overhead, just to see, I just wanted to see where garden. Oh, it doesn't actually show where garden is, okay.
I think that's well beyond the 100 feet, Justin.
It is, but I think it kind of is in syncing with what, actually prohibiting left-hand turn on at the end of garden, which is something that came up through TSC, so that might even eliminate.
Yeah, so
you want an extra long channelization.
So really, I mean, that's a good point, is that, the ideally, the longer the channelization, the less likely somebody's gonna get into opposing lanes of traffic and, you know, try to violate the gate. But you can only use a 60-foot channelization if you're dealing with a driveway or, you know, commercial driveway or a parallel road. If not, then it has to be 100 feet, at least 100 feet. So I think, Lars, you're pretty familiar with that, so.
So this one has to be 100, so we're saying.
At least 100. Yeah. And we've seen some of this channelization, you know, if you get like a 6 inch high curb and get a curb that's maybe, you know, 1 or 2 feet wide, a couple of feet wide, you wouldn't necessarily have to have those flexible delineators, because I know they can be unsightly, and when they get hit, they're a maintenance problem and those kinds of things. But you know, you could just, instead of using channelization, you could do a very narrow median. So we look at a couple of those options, depending on what.
Yeah, I think we're doing some
In the
granite
streetscape
type
project.
of.
Yes, because you wouldn't put it in and then move the
Feature of some
roadway.
kind,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
And-
sounds like you're looking at the raised median option, Kurt, for the final
Yeah,
streetscape project.
Those work great in the south. You know, you've got concerns where you've got snow but you know, if you've got it signed properly, you know, that kind of thing, maybe you could.
For traffic calming purposes, we're gonna have to learn to plow around raised medians.
I was in Somerville
future,
today, and the
so-
way the road and the parking and the bike lanes, I mean, plows have to figure it out.
Yes.
Just-
Yeah.
And they're getting snow in the south now too.
That's also true.
Yeah. They still don't have the plows though.
Yeah.
They wait for it to
They
melt.
wait for it to
Wait.
melt, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so that kind of sums up what we're talking about for the channelization or the narrow median concept here. And we think that will work, you know, for both the short term and the longer term streetscape project that you're looking at.
I think, just to follow up on the quote unquote escape gates. In the northwest and southeast quadrants, there would be likely some form of encroachment into the road in order to have room for both the pedestrian gate and the escape gate. So that's something that would be shaken out during the design. We could do a curb extension or something like that to make room for that hardware.
That may also, this is where it gets a little complicated with the cart before the horse, because whatever treatment we end up doing there, if we end up dealing with parking or widening sidewalk, I don't know what the conclusion would be, because that would make a difference as well, right?
Yeah, that'll require our coordination.
Yeah.
If your median's coming out in the final, you know, if you have a median that's gonna be widening.
Yeah.
You know, it's all gotta be considered.
You have oak here.
And again, Oak Street, you know, would be a similar concept to what we did at West. You know, it looks like you've got a little bit more room to work with at Oak Street. But you've
On
got,
the
the downside is you've got those driveways.
It's, the driveways are gonna be an issue. Yeah, you have,
Yeah, that will be a challenge, getting our profile in there with the residential driveways on the west side.
but there's both sides of, yes, both sides have
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 residential.
driveways, yeah. And residential houses as well, or two family houses.
That one's still, yeah.
The big one. Who's behind the big one?
You know, one of the things that might help us, you know, in trying to narrow or skinny up that width that we need to be able to get the system in, is if we could limit maybe the sidewalk to one side. And then we're not dealing with pedestrian gates on both sides, just the one side.
No,
There's a middle school in there.
I know here probably isn't a good time to talk about it, but I was thinking like, West Street, maybe we limit it to the side where the station's at.
I think
You know,
we've
just
talked
something
about,
to think about.
we've talked about
and
going
we
to one
can-
side in certain locations, but I would say anywhere that's likely gonna be a commuter pedestrian path is probably not one of those locations where we would be looking at going to one side.
We're looking to build more housing.
Makes sense.
You know what, are there any photos of this emergency exit implemented in real life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Can you
don't
send us
have them
some of
handy,
those?
but I can sure send them to you. Yeah. I'll send them to Dan and then Dan can get them to you.
Yeah.
I've seen one, Mary Ann, South Shore somewhere, but I'm trying to pull up some pictures.
I need to sign off to get to a work event, so I'll catch up with you all afterwards. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
For the minute, the time is 5:53.
Well, should we move on, Dan?
Yep.
So, in the studies that we looked at, I really didn't notice that the two crossings at the Needham station were mentioned as part of the quiet zone. Has this been discussed by the working group at all?
No.
What we talked about was, since they're not sounding the horn for the pedestrian crossings, they're using the station bell. It didn't come up.
Okay. So, you know, we've done several of these quiet zones at stations, and the FRA will require us to look at this. What they require in their rule, they treat this as a separate pedestrian crossing. And so there's some minimum requirements in the rule from a signing standpoint that need to be done. But then they leave it up to the diagnostic team to determine the proper treatment. And so I guess what we were thinking is, and you'll see the schedule for our diagnostics later, but one of the things we mentioned in our proposal interview was we think it's a good idea to have a pre-diagnostic conference call where we can, you know, go through each crossing, go through each concept, talk about it, talk about the challenges with it, understand a little bit more about it, so that before we get to the actual diagnostic, if there's some tweaks we need to make to our conceptual, you know, we can make them. And then we have a more productive field diagnostic meeting. And these two crossings are one of the things that we think would be good discussion points with the railroad there and the FRA, and trying to keep things to a minimum of what we need to do at these locations. So, you know, it's possible that, you know, recommendations may come in to put in at least a flashing light so that, you know, people in the parking lot coming across know a train's approaching, right? So there's a possibility of that. What some agencies have done is put in, you know, those push gates, and they push away from the track and they'd be pulling towards the parking lot. So if you're coming out of the parking lot, you have to physically pull it open to be able to get across. And, you know, while that sounds inconvenient, it puts some onus on the pedestrian to, you know, making a conscious effort that, you know, I'm going into an area that I have to pay attention to. So
How is that ADA compliant?
Yeah, I was just about to mention that.
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you know, a lot of these that I've seen done were done before the latest ADA requirements,
Well,
so.
we're already not.
You can do it with a
ADA
The
push.
stairs are there
push
too,
button.
but-
Stairs.
You're,
Yeah.
you're compliant on this side. I've
Right.
certainly seen people get on in a wheelchair.
Well, and then you've got the stairway there and that kind of thing, so, you know, there's.
On
compliance
this
issues.
part, on the other side, we don't. The
Right.
town hall.
So that, all of that needs to be discussed, and I think, you know, sometimes it's best just to have a discussion. We'll have a couple ideas that we'll run by you before our meeting, and, you know, see if you're okay with us presenting those ideas, but, you know, the idea would be to have some kind of a discussion during that pre-diagnostic meeting. And then from there, we can come up with better concepts that we can take to the actual field diagnostic.
Question on the pedestrian, if we add push gates. We had talked with the MBTA about the signals, and there was some question as to whether or not the town would have to cover the maintenance on the signals, and the gist we got from the MBTA was no. I think they could, but they wouldn't, was kind of the gist of what they told us. For these additional pedestrian amenities though, would that maintenance of them fall on the MBTA or would it fall on the municipality?
So the way it's worked at other locations outside of MBTA, that I've worked with, the agency, the town would pay for the equipment, the actual installation as part of a project, and then the railroad maintains it. But do you have experience, Dan, with, or, you know, Rich, with what's been done on MBTA at the other locations you've worked on?
A lot of times it's all just negotiating. It's, you know, asking for as much as you can get and see what they'll do. I mean, we just had this on commuter booths on roadways, you know, the bus stop locations. You know, in one project, they said, we're not gonna pay for them. Other project, they said, oh, yeah, we'll pay for them and maintain them. So it's really having
For
a
the first
discussion.
5 years or something like that, they do it after that, but I think, at least in my thought process, we're gonna be upgrading 4 of their signalized intersections that we just had the conversation are not currently safe because you
Right.
can bypass them, so that seems like a nice.
I agree with you. That needs to be part of your negotiation, because right now the equipment that they have in there is very old.
Yeah.
They probably can't really get parts for it now. I mean, the equipment you'd be putting in as part of new 4-quadrant gate systems will be brand new, state of the art, much lower maintenance. I would definitely use that as your negotiating point, you know, with them continuing to maintain, because they're maintaining now. It's just they're going to be maintaining better equipment, which should cost less.
Which when you get down to it, when you get to this, it's not just this all by itself, it's the whole package.
Yeah.
It's the whole package.
But this here, and this didn't occur to me, but you'd have to do it on both sides, right? I mean, people cross from both sides, so you'd have to put some, you had said a flashing light facing the parking lot, but there's 2 parking lots essentially. I mean, this train isn't at speed here. The train is inching.
Right, and you just heard the whistle
Yeah,
blowing,
yeah.
you know,
The least we can do
20
here, the
feet
better.
away, so.
When Kurt and I looked at this, talked about this earlier, you know, obviously the side on the near side of the photo is the station itself. People are entering, they're walking onto the platform. So we're kind of looking at, you know, the crossing and particularly the entrance from the other side as something that, you know, FRA, MBTA may look at something additional. You never know. We may get to the diagnostic and they may not require any additional measures, you know, consistent with a lot of their other locations, but it's definitely something that we do want to talk about at the diagnostic. First, the virtual call to see what the thoughts are in the field diagnostic portion of it.
Good segue to the next slide.
Just one thing to mention on this is just to understand that this area we're seeing in the foreground on the quote unquote station side, it doesn't function that way. The loading and unloading of the train all happens at the elevated platform very far north, very close to North Street. And this entire expanse of extra wide sidewalk with the big bold line is basically really just a sidewalk. People are, after they've de-trained or loaded on, might walk along it, but all of the activity happens where you see the accessible ramps to the north.
I got on that train every morning and I loaded right where that is.
I was gonna say rush hour.
At rush hour, Lars, they do load there.
Oh,
But-
okay. Sorry, I don't take the train
When
during
they
rush
close
hour.
up most of the
Yeah.
train, they have one
One
cat,
loaded.
one
Okay.
Yeah.
From the
Accessible
high
one.
platform.
one thing open.
Yeah.
My apologies. I should go to work in the morning.
Are both
So as-
crossings required? Are both crossings required from your experience? It looked like the one on the right is clear down at the end of the parking lot. And is there a
Is
way
it-
we can just channelize everybody to the center?
It's the one closer to the elevated platform for the
It's actually
accessible
not
part.
even just, it's not even the train, it's just how people get to downtown.
It
I mean,
Right,
kinda
it's
lines
connected to
up
parking
with the
lots,
other
basically.
crossing.
Yeah,
Like back and forth.
Because there's no parking for the train in any of these parts.
Okay,
So it's our employees who park on the other side who walk to town hall and other businesses.
makes sense.
Yeah. One thing we're gonna try to avoid is trying to get pedestrian gates in here.
Yes.
You know, if MBTA, FRA, DPU pushes pedestrian gates, then, you know, we're dealing with the whole escape route issue and all of that. So, you know, if right now there isn't any additional warning other than those signs. So, you know, if we can improve the level of warning for pedestrians there, I think that would be good.
So if the working group is generally supportive of where we're headed, I know there's controversy and concern about the escape route and the gate, and we'll certainly get more information, provide photographs. What we'll do is we'll reach out to the stakeholders for the diagnostic meetings. And would be looking to schedule the first one, the virtual portion would have a call to kind of go over the concepts, get initial feedback from, you know, FRA, MBTA, KILS, Mass DOT. Week of March 3rd or 10th, and then the week of March 17th, Kurt and Tim would come out from Benish and do some on-site looking around and just checking it out. Probably schedule March 19th, the Wednesday, the on-site portion of the diagnostic. For everybody to come out and to view the crossing locations and discuss the concepts in more detail.
I think our question is, we have a set amount in our warrant that's going to town meeting in May. You know, doesn't sound like you'll be designing then, are you feeling comfortable about that amount, or where are we, how are we gonna?
Well, we know that you guys were looking for that town meeting and trying to have that cost estimate, and that's part of the reason that, you know, we've jumped in fairly quickly. We got our sub-consultant agreement with Benish, fully executed a little over a week ago. We're having the working group meeting, want to get your input, we'll advance the concepts and get those, the diagnostic meeting scheduled. And then from there, we'll have enough of an idea to confirm or modify the estimates based on the equipment that they're looking for.
Well, and I'm presuming when you talk about modifying estimates, that that's independent of any easement costs.
Correct. Yeah, right of way cost would likely be extraneous from that.
And if these emergency exits were not required, I mean, I'm wondering if there's a two concept approach here.
I think the initial meeting, that virtual meeting, the first one, is just to kind of see which direction they're gonna be pushing for. And then it's sort of that negotiating thing. We talked about the should and shall, right? So what is that gonna be? Is there some discussion and some concepts that we can show them that they can sort of relax some of those requirements, so they don't have to do some of those things? I mean, I think that's the whole intent of that first virtual meeting. Can we find the path that we're supposed to be going down, right? If they get to certain decisions that they say, you know what, this is okay over here, you're gonna have to do this. then that's gonna be a question of, okay, what is the impact of doing that? What is the right of way impact? That, to me, that's the biggest thing. Designing the thing and laying them out, yeah, that can be done, but what's the right of way impact? And to the point of cost, right? So what's the right of way cost to do that? And time, right? If you've done any tip projects, you know what that's like, right?
Right.
That right of way process can take a while. I mean, you have to get appraisals. You have
Right.
to get two appraisals. You have to, make the offer, all those sorts of things. I mean, this is a safety project, right? I mean, I know the whole quiet zone thing, but at the end of the day, it's, you have to, safety is gonna be paramount, right? And are there avenues to, do you take stuff by eminent domain? That's a process, right? So I think the first thing is really to come up with the concepts, understand what they're gonna require. Where are the things we have complete latitude? Where are the things that they're gonna absolutely require? And then those things in the middle where we can kind of negotiate, and I think that's gonna be the approach. Can we get to sort of a preliminary estimate, so you go to town meeting and say, hey, look, based on the concepts, based on what we know, this is where our estimates are coming in, right? And of course, then you add the contingency, 10, 20, 30%, whatever it's gonna be, you add that contingency, so you at least go to town meeting, if you, at that point, with a number in mind. Right away is always a wild card, always a wild card. Now, we could advance that, you'll get appraisal and say, look, if we need this amount of square footage from Mrs. Jones, we know what that's gonna cost, right? I mean, you go to town meeting, you get the money, you can always get the money back, right?
Yes.
Right, never. But the simple fact is that we can get into the ballpark, order of magnitude kind of things, based on the concepts, based on what they're gonna require, and then based on what we believe the right of way impacts are gonna be.
Okay, Karis, I think you had a question.
I guess my question was, do we have an idea, like? The class estimate that we got from GPI did not include any of these pedestrian enhancements. I think that's
Right.
fair to say based on what they presented versus what we're talking about now.
Yep.
Is there a way, I know obviously within a great degree of accuracy, as we're talking about all these things, that we're not gonna get a clear number, but. As we get into the next couple of weeks, as we try to solidify some of our financial. Positions for town meeting. Getting an impact of that might be helpful to figure out how that skews it. Is it skewing it by a little or a lot, as far as, what do we have to try to?
Yeah, I mean, material wise, you're talking about a piece of sidewalk and the gate. I mean, we can try to get some prices for that and, come up with kind of a.
We're usually planning.
An estimate for location.
Yeah.
Planning level construction, that's what you want.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
You have their estimate, the 3.5 million that they were estimating?
We do.
And like. Sort of
And
related.
we have changed some of the intersections from that a little bit, right? The thinking, I thought we had quad gates everywhere.
Nope.
No, so we had already backed out to channelization.
Do you guys have an idea what the impact of these tariffs are gonna be on some of these material costs for the quad gates?
That we haven't figured yet.
No, we gotta build it in though.
Yeah.
We're gonna get you a planning level
Yeah.
design cost and construction cost of what that would be.
So I think those are the two factors that I just think will change the number from what we had
And as
estimated.
Rich said, the other curveball is it's gonna be land taking or negotiating of space to do this. If it's owned by MBTA, that's one story, but if it's owned by others, it's different.
So I will mention that, most of the equipment on the crossing warning side is Buy America, compliant. Because, utilizing federal funds to put in grade crossing safety improvement projects, requires the Buy America provision, so. Hopefully the tariffs won't be an issue associated with that, but no guarantee. We'll find out more later.
No, but if you.
So other people are raw materials.
Will use it, so the main
Somebody's
manufacturers
paying.
are Buy America.
I'm pretty sure it's us.
Yeah.
Okay,
I made a couple of questions. So we're talking about having this diagnostic process start in sometime in March. Do we need to file a formal letter with the FRA to initiate that, or has that already been done? Or how does the formal diagnostic process begin? Is it just reaching out to them and it's just a conversation, or is there a formal?
Yeah, it's just reaching out to them. you know, that you can file a notice of intent to create a quiet zone anytime within the process. But from our standpoint, we always feel it's better if we've, you know, involved everybody in some of the decision making up front, do the diagnostic team meeting, and then file the notice of intent based on what we decided in the diagnostic meeting. That way you shouldn't get a lot of adverse comments, that kind of thing, because they were part of the process.
Yeah. So, okay, so then I guess, is it also based on your experience? I mean, essentially what we're saying is we're going to go into a conversation with all of these stakeholders, with, you know, pardon the phrase, but it's term of art in my world as well, of basically cartoon drawings, right? It's not based on surveys, existing conditions. We don't really know the dimensions we're dealing with in terms of rights of way, sidewalk widths to back of curb to infrastructure. We're basically showing them, similar to what we just looked at here, concept cartoon drawings, and then asking them to tell us what they want us to do when we don't know really what our limits are. Is that right?
Well, the drawing for West Street was to scale. So, you know, we can give them an idea what the footprint's going to be. But yeah, we don't have right of way on there that we would have on a typical survey, you know, those kinds of things. So it'll be enough detail that we can tell the area that we're impacting. And then, you know, we just don't want to spend a lot of time in design and then have that design have to change. What we'd like to do is get it through the concept level and then proceed with the design.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking to Tom earlier too. He's provided us some files showing what surveys available for each of the locations. And he's gonna check to see if the CAD files are available for those, so we can pull right of way widths and things out of those, you know, as necessary, and certainly from other available data sources. So as Kurt said, each location will have the plan drawn to scale, similar to what was done for West Street. So everything will be scalable and dimensionable, and you know, with a good idea of the limits.
And I guess, so, I mean, like I said, you know, I'm like blown away by how much real estate is needed for these emergency escape pedestrian routes. So like, are there ways to consider alternative layouts to accomplish complying with those shall, should, wanna standards of the MUTCD? Or, I mean, like, for example, with West Street, is that the only option? Like, are there not other ways we could try to accomplish that without needing so much space from all four corners? Because we've got, what, two private property owners, the MBTA, and then the town. So we might have more influence on one corner.
So
No, we don't. It's not.
I'm sorry.
Great.
Yeah, so what we're trying to accomplish is trying to make sure that person in the wheelchair or pushing a baby stroller or whatever can get through that area and not get stuck between a gate that's 12 foot away from the center of the track and the track itself, and have a commuter train come right behind them. So one of the potential options, and this is something that I don't know if it's been done, you know, at MBTA or not, is to get the gate located further away from the center track, so that there's a storage area. There's more of a storage area between the gate and the track, so somebody could, you know, not be as close to the train potentially. I mean, that's what we're trying to avoid. We don't want anybody to get trapped in there and potentially get hit by a train. That's number one. So if there's a way we can accomplish it, maybe having a storage. It's not going to be comfortable being in there, I can tell you, between a gate and the train. You don't want to do that. But if we can move the gate out to maybe 20 feet where, you know, you're 10 foot away from the track, be more like being on a platform kind of thing. So
But I think that would raise the issue of somebody in there knowing actually where the foul line is with respect to the rail, 5 feet from the nearest rail.
yeah, I think you make a great point. I think you can do some of that with marking, marking the zone where they shouldn't be. But yeah, that's one of the challenges with that, and that's why we prefer the exit path route.
In that meeting, you're gonna have folks in the room with the same goals here, and the goals of safety. There's a goal of making it economical and doing the best you can from a finance standpoint and cost standpoint. But getting in that room with there'll be more than cartoons. Is gonna give them a basis for the discussion. And this is the point of discussion. No one's negotiated anything yet. No one's made any decisions yet, so we can think what they may look like, but at the end of the day, having that discussion is gonna matter. It's gonna give us a lot of direction. But they've got that same incentive. They don't like being in the newspaper with accidents. They don't like their reels being shut down for any reason. And they have an incentive to make that happen. And I think we're aligned, being from the town standpoint and from the railroad standpoint, to make sure that that's the case. So we go in with that attitude and the notion of, hey, well, let's do what we need to do here. But at the end of the day, there's that same incentive on both parts to get people.
I'm sure they're aware, like, they have a lot of urban areas, like, that there's just,
They do.
Kurt,
if you had to take a whole bunch of property, this thing is gonna be.
Kurt, we can follow up with,
But I don't know how many urban areas they put quiet.
Well, they've got
zones
Chelsea
into
going.
Yeah, but I bet you they don't have the
recently.
pedestrian exit because they're pre-roll. Like, I wonder if they didn't have to comply with that.
Yeah,
Beverly
I mean,
They didn't in Beverly?
did not.
Yeah.
There was a set done up for the Down Easter and in southern Maine not terribly long ago. In some urban areas, I don't have the locations in mind, but I mean, the question sort of becomes what might be the most recent or nearest example of some place where they actually did some taking to get one of these escape routes.
Is Franklin doing this?
Franklin did their study.
The study with
I
that.
haven't heard yet if they're gonna advance
Norfolk
on it.
already applied them, it's only through Norfolk, is that? But that line was already quiet,
Which one?
the Franklin line.
No,
Franklin's portion is not, and they're close. I think they have 5 crossings at Great Crescent, so they're similar to us in that regard.
Yeah.
I was wondering if what the discussion with the MBTA was about these pedestrian access and how that went.
Yeah, and the added space needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll wrap around.
In South Coast.
I'll follow up, Kurt, with Lou Frangella, the FRA.
I think Lou just retired. That's what I heard the other day, so. We'll
his,
figure out who we need to talk to.
I've
But
got his second in command, I just don't remember. the
yeah,
name.
there you go. I don't know, maybe Lou will still be answering his phone, but I just heard that today from Rick,
Okay.
so.
So, 2 other questions to ask. One is, okay, so we start the conversation with all these stakeholders in mid-March. What then is the process to get to a place where we have an agreed upon scope? I mean, given your experience, you've got track record with them, you know what they're looking for. You're guiding us on what it is we need to do. What is the duration to get to a place where we've got sort of, call it design development drawings or concept drawings? We know what we're really working on.
Well, Kurt, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but coming out of the diagnostic meeting, we'll have pretty clear direction on what will need to be done as far as development of the designs.
The March 19th meeting.
Yeah, the March 19th meeting.
Yeah.
And then from there, move forward with the design schedule.
Got it. So it's a pretty quick process in terms of feedback from them and then therefore direction of what we need to do.
Yep. Yeah, we'll have the diagnostic meeting. There may be questions that come up in the field that we need to follow up on, but we'll prepare meetings from that diagnostic. Minutes, I'm sorry, from the diagnostic meeting. Distribute them to the stakeholders, give them all the opportunity to provide feedback. And answer any questions that were left unanswered in the field.
Yep.
And then that'll pretty much be our basis of design memorandum.
But what I'm hearing is you're wanting to get some kind of an estimate like before May. Is that what your concern is? I don't think we'll get anything in the railroad probably before May, because typically railroads don't even want to give you, an estimate, a ballpark estimate. They'd rather dig into it a little bit further because they don't want to commit to something and then they come back later and say, well, this is our real estimate. And guess what? We didn't ask for enough money before. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speak for anyone else in the working group, but I mean, just kind of reading between the lines of where we are right now in the process, I'm not personally focused on trying to make something happen for purposes of the town meeting. I'm just trying to understand, you know, what are the next steps? Where do we go from here? How does this unfold? Because we just need to plan accordingly. And I guess, so that's just a comment, but the other question I have is, so if we're going to have this first conversation with the MBTA, and obviously, you know, there's the formal quiet zone process, but what about talking about with the golf course with them, and how does that occur?
That'll be something that we can discuss. It's, as you know, it won't be part of the quiet zone, but it'll be something that we can discuss in those diagnostic conversations. The recommendations were pretty clear that, you know, MBTA was looking for something under the railroad tracks. But in talking with Kurt and when we've gone out to the field and I've visited the golf course, you know, other options may include going with the wayside horns instead of blowing a horn on approach from each direction. So those are the kind of things that we can talk about with FRA and Keolis to see if that's something that they might entertain.
Does the FRA have any jurisdiction? It's really, isn't it just really between the town and the state? Or do they weigh in just because of their overall jurisdiction?
So you're right. The FRA has jurisdiction over the railroad from a safety standpoint, but they're there to provide safety guidance and based on their experience working in other quiet zones in the region. The one that has regulatory authority is the DPU.
Yeah.
All crossings, if they're modified, require DPU approval. So
I guess
it's
sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I would say it's the DPU, railroad, and the town that are, you know, the primary decision makers on this.
Yeah, and I guess I would just, it just seems mind-blowing to me that the gates process is acceptable for vehicle crossings, but is not acceptable in a golf course setting. And I know we've talked to the MBTA already, but I don't know if the participants in the diagnostic conversation are different people or different level of people that might have more receptivity to alternatives like doing, you know, the equivalent of 4 quad gates or something like that. That seems more realistic and reasonable. Just like that would be an opportunity to explore.
So one of the issues, if you're looking at quiet zone there, is that
I don't know, it can't be a quiet zone, but essentially what I'm saying is,
so you
do the quiet zone stuff, even though it's really a negotiated agreement between the town and the state.
Yeah, so you're looking at a safety and negotiated agreement, and that's why, you know, we were throwing out the wayside horn as a possibility. You know, one of the things that could potentially be done, the manufacturer of the only wayside horn in the country is located right in Fort Worth, just right down the road from where we're at. So we've had discussions with them and we've gotten them to go out to do a demonstration of the technology. So they bring a wayside horn out, sound it, you know, show what the impact is to adjacent neighborhoods, you know, that kind of thing. So, you know, that might be a possibility if you want to go that route and consider that. Even if you had to pay for their expenses to come out, it wouldn't be, you know, that much, I don't think. So.
Can you just say how the wayside horn is different from the train horn?
Yeah, so the idea with the wayside horn is in the train horn rule, it allows for the installation of a wayside horn that sounds at a specific decibel level that typically is less than the standard train horn. It's required to be 96 decibels, 100 feet from the track. And the idea is you're focusing the horn noise on the roadway approach where the driver or the golf carts need it, rather than sounding the horn from on board the locomotive a quarter mile from the crossing all the way through the crossing. You've got a lot narrower zone of noise level. And then typically it's a lower noise level. The challenge is it can be repetitive. You can get maybe more individual blasts of the horn, but it's at a lower level. So,
Okay.
but it sounds too long to short and long, just like a standard train horn, but it's
It does
focused.
do the too long short.
I recall seeing some diagrams of those, so the zones that they cover appeared to be fairly directional. And my recollection is the approaches to the golf cart crossing are anything but straight. I
Correct.
mean, they're.
Well, yeah, but it's not, it is directional, but it's not that directional that the golf cart wouldn't be a problem. I wouldn't think.
Well, I think what was being mentioned is that basically on the south side of the crossing, there basically is 3 separate cart paths that all converge at the crossing, coming from the south, the west, and the east. And then on the north side, essentially, there's really mostly to the east, but a little bit to the west as well. So it would just be a lot. But again, I feel like I don't mean to be bigfooting the conversation, but I would advocate for trying to make sure we talk to whomever's in the room about what are the possibilities for addressing the golf course, because my opinion, and it doesn't count for anything, I'm not an engineer like the rest of you, but it just seems odd that we couldn't use the same sort of safety measures. And maybe there's different people to ask the question to than who we've talked to so far. Just a thought.
Yeah, it's just because you're dealing with a cooperative agreement with the railroad, you've got to negotiate that with them. So
yeah, understood.
And I don't know how many wayside horns MBTA has on their territory. That might be a stretch for them to even want to consider that technology.
Right, which is why I thought the gates, which are more well understood and accepted, might be the path there as well.
Perfectly logical. So yeah, we'll have the right people at that meeting to have some discussions after our pre-diagnostic discussion.
Can you bring up the logical argument about the gates to them about the golf course?
What was that?
Well, we know logic always prevails, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right,
When do we meet again? Late March?
after
It's
the
a-
diagnostic
it's
meeting?
After the diagnostic meetings, right?
Yeah.
The 3rd or the 10th, whatever that first.
So 3rd, 10th, we'll have the virtual diagnostic, and then 19th will be the on-site, and then the working group can meet.
Do you think most of it will get
Sometime
resolved through the virtual just because we'll have some better answers, or do you think the
Does it make
on-site?
sense to have a meeting after the virtual, just to kind of get a direction?
We could do that if you'd like.
Have you got them committed or you?
We haven't got that
You
committee
don't
yet.
have them committed. But I think you'd proposed that was 10th or 11th, or was that
Either
the
week of
first
the
week?
3rd or the week of the 10th, yeah, which they're based on their availability. But I guess the question is, does it make sense after that, just to give you all a sense of kind of where things are headed? And I guess I would defer to Kurt and Dan. Do we think after that virtual meeting, we'll have enough information to come back to the committee with, or should we wait until after the in the field diagnostic? Don't want to waste everybody's time, like, okay, we met with them, they talked about this, but they really said we can't make any firm decisions until we get out in the field and do you know what I mean? We don't want to waste anyone's time either, so, yeah. How
Talking about a
soon?
week's worth of time. It's the 10th and the 17th.
Yeah, it's a week apart anyway.
So we're gonna have some conceptuals for the pre-diagnostic. And then based on the discussion of the pre-diagnostic, we're gonna fine tune those conceptuals. So we should be able to have, depending on when we do the pre-diagnostic, if it's 2 weeks in advance, we could fine tune them right after that, and then be able to have one, meeting in between. What were the dates? We had the 3rd, the 10th. Is that right? 3rd, the 10th, and the 17th.
For a meeting with this group, you'd have diagnostic with the virtual and you'd have a in-person.
For the 26th, we might have some real good update.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the March 9th, you're proposing March 19th for the
Right.
on-site portion of the diagnostic, right? So that would be the following week.
Following week. 26.
Kurt, you feel comfortable with that? That we have enough information from your perspective?
So when are you anticipating the pre-diagnostic?
So
The third?
the virtual diagnostic, either the week of the 3rd or the 10th, but the on-site portion of the diagnostic meeting, out in the field, is currently tentatively
Sorry, the
scheduled for
19th.
March 19th. The following week after that, would we have some meaningful information to present to the committee? After the
I would
field.
think so. I mean, that's gonna be, we're gonna have to tweak whatever drawings we have based on the diagnostics. So, that's probably gonna be on your team to do those modifications to the drawing. So I guess I
Yeah.
kind of leave that up to you.
That makes,
Yeah, we can do that.
So now we don't have any connection for the committee from the early stage to the later stage. We're just coming in after.
We'll have the diagnostic meeting, and then we could debrief and go over the results of that. And then we'll enter the design in earnest. We could certainly,
I think what's gonna be presented at the virtual diagnostic, and then the one on the 19th is the things that we've talked about tonight. And then getting some direction from them as to, these are the things that we're good with, and these are the things that you're gonna need to tweak.
I just am
So-
not overly optimistic that you're gonna get these meetings when you want these meetings. That's why I
Yeah.
think we need to wait to the end of March, or we're just moving the
Yeah.
meeting again.
Okay, so I'm also wondering, so Harrison, Tom, you're gonna be involved in
Yes, they
these
meet with them,
meetings.
so, yeah.
All right. I don't know if it makes sense or if it's useful for Lars, Justin to also be there. If it's an option, not an option.
Well, we typically have our internal meetings with our consultants. We don't usually have residents participate.
I think we're good.
Who would be the
Yeah.
town's representative?
No, I'm back.
What was that, Kurt?
Who would be the town's representative at the meeting?
Tom and
Would be
myself.
Okay,
Tom and Karen.
Tom and Karis.
okay, good.
I think then it's safe to say that we want to figure out how there's some update to the committee
After both meetings.
after both meetings,
Both meetings,
the
okay.
pre-meeting
Yes.
and the,
And the thought would be that the 26th or at some point in that week or two, post in-person diagnostic, give Dan and his team a little bit of time to make any adjustments that need to be made based on those discussions, and then when here we have another discussion.
I would also say it is possible that we could, without having to burden Tang Bond with coming in, if we hear something that is radically different or concerning or something else, Tom and I can also present that if that's necessary.
I'm just saying, after the first meeting, somebody can write an email to
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah.
I'll provide meeting notes immediately following the first.
One of us will send it to everyone as opposed
Have the
to,
meeting though.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
that
Absolutely.
would be great.
then
Okay,
our team can ask us questions and we can ask you questions.
so do we want to put a date on the calendar to hold on the 26th?
Yeah, 5 o'clock on the 26th.
5 o'clock on the
I
26th?
put it in already.
Okay,
Miles, could you send it to?
yeah, because then we'll want to send it out to the list because we don't have everybody still on the call.
So one of the things I was wondering, would it make sense once we get the conceptual plans done and before the meeting with the pre-diagnostic meeting, to have a discussion with Tom? Just to make sure that, we're doing this like we talked about, any issues you see, that kind of thing, just so we're not going into the meeting with drawings that the town has never seen before. You know, I'd
Yeah, no, that
really
makes
feel
sense.
more comfortable if Tom and the town had had a chance to at least look what we're proposing, so.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think once we have those done, Kurt, we'll schedule a video call and look at them on screen, walk through with them, you know.
And I think the message from us is the least engineered solution, the better. And please help us find an answer for the golf course.
Well-
And minimize takings.
Limited land.
Yeah, and I think we need to see some real life examples of what these look like, because, that from the drawing that we have, I'm challenged to really see how these parts fit together.
Mhm.
Parklands, near any of this, by the way,
Is there what?
parklands.
Designated green
No.
space.
Well, Avery Common,
Yeah,
What are
but
you
that's
thinking?
across a driveway and,
Or,
how close does it have to be?
I mean, if you were
wanna swap
doing an
it, or-
easement,
How?
if you needed to take an easement from Parkland,
Oh,
that has to go to the legislature.
Oh, yeah.
no,
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 I
I
don't think there's any
I
of
didn't even want to
that.
bring it up, but
Yeah,
No.
no.
you know that,
held to ask the
No.
question.
we've been there.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, there's none that you have on your plan.
awesome.
Okay,
Okay,
great.
awesome.
All
We
right.
need to get
Any
vacate
other
for-
questions for the moment? Then I would welcome a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right,
Thank you, Kurt. We'll be in touch.
Lars? Do you wanna,
Aye.
aye, Duncan,
Aye.
Kate,
Yes.
Mary Ann, aye.
Aye.
Justin's gone, he lost his internet,
Oh, boy, okay.
so. And never made it back on,
He's got another meeting.
okay,
You have traffic tonight?
all right.
Yeah.
Thank
All
you,
right, sorry.
everybody.